After discovering the first T-shaped pillar buried at the site, he soon found more of these massive structures. In the center of each enclosure, you have two particularly big T-shaped pillars of limestone sort of facing each other. The world's oldest monument has just revealed a secret no one was prepared for. After scanning Gobeclete's 12,000-year-old pillars with advanced AI, researchers found patterns, heat scars, and internal structures that should not exist in the Stone Age. Some pillars appear carved from the inside out. Others still vibrate with low-frequency sound. Beneath them lies something even older. The investigation was meant to explain history. Instead, it exposed a terrifying truth. The builders tried to bury forever. I discovers Gobeclete was never a temple. The terror began the moment the team opened the new AI reconstruction on the screen. Everyone had expected a simple confirmation of the old idea that Göbekli Tepe was an early temple. This was the official goal of the project. The team wanted to map the site with higher accuracy, confirm its ceremonial purpose, and build a clearer timeline for human development. Instead, the image that appeared stopped every person in the room. The layout looked engineered and controlled. It resembled something built to hold something down. The team used an advanced mapping algorithm designed to scan ancient sites and rebuild their original layouts with micro-level accuracy. It works by reading every exposed surface, every fracture, and every buried stone shadow, and then using a giant database of geological behavior to calculate where each pillar originally stood. When the reconstruction was done, the AI simulation displayed a geometric precision that was impossible for the time period. These pillars are anthropomorphic. They are human-like in appearance. The oldest enclosures known to archaeologists as enclosures, D, C, and B, connected in a mathematically perfect triangular alignment. This meant the builders placed the pillars with a level of precision that rivaled modern surveying tools. This detail became even more disturbing when the team looked into the nature of the pillars themselves. Many of them stand up to 18 feet tall. Some weigh more than 50 tons. Several contain carvings so sharp and clean that modern stoneworkers cannot explain how they were made with stone tools. One pillar in enclosure D has a carving of a vulture with outstretched wings. The carving is raised from the stone, which means the builders had to cut away the entire background surface by hand. There's such an incredible range of animals and birds and insects depicted at Gobeclete, the like of which we have never seen at that period anywhere else in the world. Another pillar includes 3 abstract symbols that match no known writing system. These symbols appear evenly spaced and perfectly straight, which means the builders understood alignment and measurement even though they had no written numbers. Archaeologists have noted for years that no stone flakes or broken tool remains were found around the pillars. This absence is strange because carving limestone normally leaves mountains of debris. At Gobeclete, the floors are surprisingly clean. The team knew the builders of Gobeclete lived long before farming, writing, or organized cities. They should not have had the knowledge to move such stones or cut such clean lines. Yet, the triangle alignment was intentional. This incredible feat of architecture is not the most revolutionary thing about this place. Another program used an internal vibration analysis model to test the way sound and vibration move inside the structure. This tool focuses on what happens within the stone circles themselves. It studies how energy travels through the pillars, floors, and inner chamber. In a real temple, sound would rise or move outward and create an open echo that supports group activity. At Gobeclete, the simulation revealed something completely different. The vibration did not rise or spread. It collapsed inward. The pillars pulled the force toward the center of the enclosure. The stone absorbed the movement and trapped it. This discovery shocked the team because it matched the behavior seen in modern containment rooms used in laboratories that handled dangerous energy. The structure acted like it was designed to catch and hold force inside a central point. Nothing about this behavior matched anything related to worship. There were no altars, no fire pits, and no signs of important gatherings. The builders were not directing attention outward. They were managing something inside the space. Always hoped that it was wasserary and that there would be burials underneath the walls or underneath some of the pillars. This revelation unsettled the entire group and pushed them to look at the larger layout of the site. A third analytical system that studies structural pattern behavior examined the entire layout from above. This program evaluates how a structure handles pressure and force across all of its parts. It focuses on the overall design rather than the behavior inside one. Enclosure. Engineers use similar systems today to understand whether a building can resist dangerous ground movement. When this structural pattern model analyzed Gobeclete, the result stunned the team. The layout matched the designs of modern systems that control deep ground. Vibration. These harmful vibrations are powerful waves that travel under the surface of the earth. They can damage stone and cause severe instability if they grow unchecked. Gobeclete's layout created a network of cancellation points that stopped this from happening. A cancellation point is a place where two vibration waves meet in a way that destroys their force. When this collision takes place, the power inside the ground breaks apart and fades. The structure does not release the energy. It neutralizes it. The analysis showed that the builders shaped the entire site, so these destructive waves were forced into the exact places where their strength would collapse. The system spread across multiple enclosures. This meant the builders created a complete design with a single purpose. They built a structure that prevented energy from escaping. This discovery changed everything. The team believed the site was built to control something below time when it shouldn't have been possible to do it. They then buried each enclosure after probably just a few hundred years of use. The team had no time to process the horror of that idea before the AI made the next discovery. AI detects machine cuts inside the pillar. The next round of scans focused directly on the pillars themselves. Archaeologists always assumed they were carved from the outside with stone hammers. The AI proved this assumption was completely false. The first method used was a high penetration scanning system that sends energy waves into the stone and measures how they bounce back. It can see inside solid rock up to 6 feet deep. When the scans appeared on the monitors, the team gathered around. At first, they expected to see the familiar rough carving patterns caused by repeated strikes from tools. Instead, they saw perfect internal channels that no hammer could produce. The tool paths did not move from the outside inward. They moved from the inside outward. One researcher stepped back from the screen in disbelief. The internal structure showed clear signs of controlled movement that began deep inside the pillar. It looked as if something expanded from the center and pushed its way outward through the limestone. The cuts were straight and clean. They were far more precise than anything that could be made with flint or obsidian. To verify the finding, they used a microscopic fracture analysis program that studies the structure of stone at a very small scale. It can tell whether a surface was shaped by repeated impacts or by a mechanical process that uses pressure or heat. Impact patterns are easy to recognize. They show tiny chips, uneven scars, and crushed grain lines that come from a tool hitting the stone again and again. These marks always point inward because the force comes from outside. When this program analyzed the cores of the pillars, none of these impact signs appeared. Instead, the fractures showed something completely different. They showed expansion patterns. Expansion patterns are cracks that form when internal pressure pushes outward. These cracks spread in straight lines from the center toward the edges. They appear when heat or force builds inside the stone and forces the material to stretch and break outward. This type of pattern cannot be made by any hammer or chisel. The analysis revealed melting points above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit deep inside the pillars. No ancient stone tool could reach that temperature. The fractures proved that the pillars had been forced outward from within. Something inside the stone created pressure strong enough to reshape it. A third system that maps ancient heat signatures then examined the limestone. The result intensified the confusion in the room. The internal surfaces of several pillars showed heat scars that came from sudden bursts of extreme temperature. These marks did not appear on the outer surfaces. They existed only inside the stone. This meant the heat source had been contained within the pillar itself. The team exchanged silent looks. The pillars did not appear to be shaped for decorative or symbolic purposes. They appeared to be reinforcing something inside the rock. This incredible feat of architecture is not the most revolutionary thing about this place. This idea grew stronger when the team remembered an old archaeological mystery. Several pillars contain long internal fissures that no one could explain. These fissures run through the center of the stone in straight lines. Archaeologists once believed they formed naturally. The AI showed they had been created by internal pressure, the strange heat scars. This cave system supplies the evidence that tells us that the Zoroastrian mythology is in fact a real, true story. The next discovery began with something small that most researchers had ignored for years. During routine excavation, the team noticed thin layers of darkened soil packed into narrow spaces between stones. At first, these traces were dismissed as the remains of ancient campfires or natural sediment from nearby settlements. Nothing on the pillars showed obvious burn marks, and the fire traces appeared only in certain soil layers, not on the carved surfaces. Because of this, no one believed they carried any real meaning. It was only when the team gathered these samples for a deeper AI analysis that the situation took a darker turn. The subtle black streaks and faint discolorations, once thought to be minor debris, revealed patterns that did not form naturally. They followed precise locations within the site, almost as if something had been burned in controlled points that left behind only faint shadows of the event. Laboriously created by layering burned lime and clay to create a smooth, luxurious surface. The first analytical system the team used compared ancient heat patterns to a large database of modern examples from controlled laboratory environments. When the program finished its analysis, several researchers leaned closer to the screen. The result made no sense at first. The heat distribution showed patterns of controlled localized burning. The temperatures recorded were sufficient to alter limestone's molecular structure. It matched surface cauterization, which is a technique used to destroy harmful material on contact. This finding pushed the team to examine deeper parts of the site. Burned limestone was discovered inside narrow CLFs, where no one could possibly have lived or worked. These CLFs showed temperatures high enough to change the color and structure of the stone. These temperatures would not appear unless someone heated the rock intentionally. Even more unsettling were the burn marks around some of the animal carvings. Some of them showed melted or smoothed surfaces as if the builders had tried to erase the images after carving them. Several of the damaged figures were the same types commonly seen across Göbekli Tepe. Fox carvings, which are normally shown with sharply cut ribs, had their lines softened. Vulture carvings, often depicted with wide outstretched wings, showed blurred edges where heat appeared to deform the stone. Oh, these are hands, right? 2 hands, right? And if that isn't convincing enough, then just look here. There is a belt. Scorpions, typically carved with raised tails and clear stingers, now looked flattened in places where the surface had been heated. It looked as if the builders targeted these specific figures, weakening their appearance and reducing their detail, as though the symbols themselves had become dangerous. A second analytical method focused on identifying chemical residues inside the burned stone. This type of analysis is used today to determine whether heat was applied to remove biological contamination. When the program processed the material, the result pulled the room into complete silence. The chemical traces matched sterilization events. They showed repeated cycles of heating and cooling meant to clean or deactivate something. Everything pointed to a deliberate attempt to clear harmful material. Wasting no time, the team used a heat flow simulation model to recreate how the intense temperatures would have moved across the pillars and walls. The pathways it generated matched the areas where carvings were partially melted. This proved that the burning was done with precision. The fire did not spread randomly. It followed deliberate lines. It stopped at exact points. The discovery forced the team to rethink the entire site. Gobecli Tepe showed signs of burning something invisible that had clung to the stone. The builders were not shaping rock. They were cleansing it. The team moved quickly to the next step. They needed to understand whether the site still carried any traces of the force that required such extreme measures. AI detects low-frequency harmonic signatures, the oldest temple unearthed anywhere on this planet. The team expected this next analysis to be simple. They believed that sound tests would only confirm what archaeologists already knew. Gobeclete had unusual acoustics and some of its stone circles carried sound. Well, no one expected anything dangerous until the results started coming in. The first analysis used a system that maps low-frequency infrasound and identifies where these waves rise, fall, and concentrate inside ancient structures. When the system scanned the pillars, it revealed constant low-frequency activity in the 18 to 20 Hz range. These frequencies are known to create powerful reactions in the human body. They can trigger fear, dread, nausea, and hallucinations even in healthy people. Several team members felt sick while watching the simulation. Even though the real sound was too low to be heard, their bodies sensed it. Earlier studies at Göbekli Tepe had already shown that the same structures also resonate at audible frequencies around 110 Hz, a range known to induce trance-like and altered states of consciousness, making the newly detected infrasound effects even more disturbing. To understand the full effect, the team used a digital acoustic reconstruction model. This type of software is used today to recreate how ancient rooms and monuments handled sound. The model rebuilt the original conditions of the structure, including the limestone roof coverings that once stood over parts of the site. When the simulation added the ancient roof, the infrasound grew stronger. The pillars behaved like long tuning forks. A tuning fork is a solid metal tool that vibrates when struck and produces a steady sound. Hold the tines near your ear or the base of a large flat surface, such as a tabletop or a whiteboard. The shape of the fork allows it to absorb energy and release it in a focused way. The pillars at Gobecli Tepe worked in the same manner. They absorbed the low-frequency waves moving through the structure and then released the energy again with even greater strength. This made sense in a deeply disturbing way. Many of the pillars have long, narrow arms that rise from a central stem. Archaeologists have noticed that these shapes resemble simple human forms or symbols of authority and presence. After discovering the first T-shaped pillar buried at the site, he soon found more of these massive structures. Yet, they also resembled tools designed to amplify vibration. When the simulation completed, several researchers stepped back from the screens. The amplified infrasound created a field of pressure in the center of the circle. Some of the enclosures at Gobeclete Tepe are already known to carry sound in unusual ways. A whisper spoken near one pillar can be heard clearly on the opposite side of the circle. This is impressive, but the acoustic data revealed something stronger. The sound did not only travel around the enclosure, it turned inward and collected near the central pillars. And it is huge. Unbelievable. Look at this place. This central space has always been mysterious. The largest pillars stand there carved with animals, abstract symbols, and highly detailed forms. Some archaeologists believe these pillars represent guardians or powerful beings because of their human-like shapes and straight, rigid posture. The new findings gave those carvings a different meaning. The central pillars acted as receivers for low-frequency waves. The team then used a neurological comparison model that matches known infrasound ranges to documented effects on the human mind. The results showed clear connections. The 5 stone circles unearthed at the site only scratch the surface of what lies buried below. These frequencies can cause visual distortions, sudden anxiety, and the sense of being watched. They can disrupt balance and make the brain misinterpret shadows as threats. The structure behaved like a sound field designed to influence anyone inside it. The team realized that the strange acoustics were not accidental. They were intentional. The builders had created a sound system that shaped human behavior. The team now moved to the next mystery. They needed to understand why the site was buried so quickly. Could help explain some of the mysterious figures immortalized in the stone carvings. The burial sequence. The burial of Gobecli Tepe had always confused archaeologists. Most ancient sites were abandoned or slowly covered by time, but Göbekli Tepe was buried under millions of cubic feet of dirt. At first, researchers believed this was a ceremonial closure. They thought the builders ended the life of the site with respect. The AI proved this idea was completely wrong. When the burial layers were analyzed with high precision, the pattern that appeared pointed to fear, chaos, and a desperate attempt to hide something fast. Curtis Shepard had stumbled upon what is perhaps the most astonishing archaeological discovery in modern times. The first analysis used a high-resolution stratigraphic reconstruction system that can rebuild soil layers as if time is moving backward minute by minute. When the simulation began, the team watched the layers peel away on the screen. Instead of slow and natural buildup, the soil appeared in sudden thick deposits. 3 major waves of fill material covered the site, and they happened in less than 6 years. This shocked the team because such a massive amount of dirt could not be moved without thousands of people working with urgency. No ancient culture has ever buried a site of this size at that speed. As the soil reconstruction played forward and backward, something even more disturbing appeared. The soil did not simply fall across the ground. Some layers preserved footprints. These prints were long, deep, and angled forward. They were the prints of people running. This was not a peaceful ceremony. It was signs of an event filled with fear. Seemingly at the end of its useful life was completely covered over. Type of motif can be found elsewhere around the world. The team then used a forensic bone damage analysis program to study the human skull fragments found inside the burial fill. Some skulls had deep grooves, and in the past, archaeologists believed these grooves were decorative cuts made during ritual ceremonies. They thought the skulls had been carved intentionally as offerings or symbolic objects. The new analysis revealed a very different explanation. The grooves were not careful carvings. They were fractures caused by force. They looked like the damage created when a skull is struck by a hard object. The skeletons that measured between 7 and 8 feet in height, which for ancient man would have been rather significant. Several real archaeological details supported this conclusion. A number of skull fragments from Gobeclete showed deep cuts along the sagittal line of the head, a place where ritual carving is not normally performed. One skull from the region contains a drilled hole that may have allowed it to be hung or displayed. Some cervical vertebrae even show signs of decapitation. These findings were once interpreted as ritual practices within the context of the burial layers. They now appeared to be the results of trauma. They belong to people who suffered violent blows before they were buried. Therefore, if you want to understand the site, you have to look at it from the other places. They were not placed in the ground as offerings. They were victims of an event, not participants in a ceremony. What caused this violence is still unknown. No battlefield has been found and no weapons or written accounts explain such trauma. Archaeologists still have no confirmed explanation, which only made the discovery more disturbing. Among the most unsettling discoveries were the smashed statues. Gobeclete contains carved pillars that show animals with detailed features, human-shaped figures with arms and hands, and clear geometric patterns to the front and end in these long, spindly fingers. There are no faces on these stones. These carvings are believed to reflect important ideas or beliefs held by the builders inside the burial layers. However, fragments of these carvings were found lying face down. In many ancient cultures, placing an image face down means the figure is being rejected or stripped of its importance. It is a gesture made when people no longer want the image to have influence. The builders did not place the carvings gently into the dirt. They broke them and then buried the pieces as if the images themselves had become dangerous. One detail from the region added even more unease. Archaeologists have found multiple stone heads that were intentionally removed from statues, including one known as the gift-bearer figure holding a severed human head. Pillar 43 also depicts a decapitated man for future generations, and we need to figure out exactly what that message is. These earlier discoveries were long interpreted as ritual. Under the new context, they looked more like warnings. Another analysis examined the soil movement across the site. It showed that the dirt used to bury Gobeclete did not come only from the nearby hill. A large amount of soil was taken from distant areas and transported to the site. This required significant manpower and effort. It meant groups were moving heavy loads of dirt across long distances as quickly as they could. The modeling traced the direction and speed of the soil deposits. It revealed that the fill material was dumped rapidly in large waves, not added slowly in organized layers. This supported the idea that the burial was done in a rush. The team stepped away from the monitors, deeply unsettled. The evidence was clear. The people of Gobeclete were not closing a sacred site. They were trying to cover something quickly. They were racing against something they feared. The next step was to investigate what lay under the site itself, and that answer would force the team to confront a darker possibility, a structure never meant to be unearthed. The most disturbing discovery came when the team began scanning the ground beneath the site. For years, archaeologists suspected that something lay under Gobeclete because certain stone circles sat on top of hollow areas that did not match natural formations. Local legends from nearby villages told stories of hollow hills, strange echoes under the earth, and nights when people claimed the stones made noise. These tales were always dismissed as folklore. There was never enough evidence to take them seriously. Everything changed when the ground scanning systems were activated. The first system used was a high-resolution, deep-penetration ground mapping scanner. This device sends powerful signals into the earth and rebuilds hidden spaces based on the reflections that return. When the model finished, the team stared at the screen in shock. Under enclosure D, the scan revealed a large multi-room chamber carved long before the pillars were built. The chamber had straight walls, clear entry points, and wide internal spaces that did not match any known Stone Age construction. This structure did not belong to the people who built the pillars above it. To confirm the shapes, the team ran an underground density imaging analysis. This system studies the texture and compactness of underground features and identifies the difference between natural rock and shaped stone. The results were unmistakable. The walls were not natural. They were intentionally cut. Yet, the style of cutting did not match anything found on the surface. The chamber had been built by a different group using entirely different methods. Next, a mineral aging analysis examined the patterns of crystal growth on the chamber walls. It calculated the age of the underground structure by measuring how these mineral layers formed over time. The chamber was older than the pillars by several thousand years. This shocked the team. They had always believed Gobeclete represented the beginning of complex construction. Now they were looking at something even older and more advanced hidden below it. The shock deepened when the surface of the underground walls was examined under thermal and microstructural analysis. Several areas showed signs of heat so intense that the stone had fused and melted. These were not surface burns. They came from deep inside the rock. The melting patterns did not match volcanic activity or natural fire. They matched extreme internal pressure and violent heat release. When a molecular scan zoomed in on the fused stone, the room fell silent. The analysis detected traces of biological residue locked inside the mineral layers. These residues were not plant-based. They were not from animals normally found in the region. The patterns resembled protein fragments that appear when organic material breaks down under intense heat and crushing force. This meant something biological had been inside the chamber when the heat event occurred. The fused walls showed damage moving outward, not inward. Something inside the chamber pushed with enough strength to crack, melt, and distort the stone. The model showed clear lines where the pressure broke through a section of the wall. The breach path rose toward the surface directly under where enclosure D was later constructed. The team stepped away from the screen. The meaning was clear. Gobeclete was not built as a place of worship. It was built above something ancient and dangerous. The people who built the pillars were sealing a chamber that should never have been exposed. What happened next forced the team to look beyond the site itself. They needed to understand why this event aligned with global changes that took place at the same time. What several regions did animals die? The reset event. The final part of the investigation brought all previous findings into one place. The team began studying the wider world during the time Gobeclete was buried. Walking to Gobek. Cool. How do you feel? Oh, I am stoked. I am so stoked. They expected normal climate changes and cultural shifts. Instead, they discovered a timeline filled with sudden disruptions. When the model compared the dates, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The burial of Gobeclete did not happen during a calm period. It happened during a violent global transition between 10,000 and 9,000 years before the Common Era, a phase modern researchers sometimes call the early Holocene instability period. Several major sites were abandoned at nearly the same time, including Kortesipi, Jerelamar, Malafat Holland Semi, and the early layers of Jericho. In each case, occupation layers end abruptly and are replaced by sudden cultural silence. This was not slow decline. It was a rapid, widespread interruption. The first data set the team examined involved sudden magnetic changes, geological layers from Europe, the Middle East, Siberia, and parts of East Asia show fast swings in the Earth's magnetic field between 10,500 and 9,500 BCE. These shifts do occur in nature, but not at this speed and not across so many regions at once. They indicate a period of global instability. The next data set involved atmospheric dust. Ice cores taken from Greenland and Antarctica show that the air became filled with fine dust particles during the early Holocene period, with notable peaks around 9,600 BCE. These particles do not match volcanic ash alone and do not match desert dust alone. They contain traces of both, along with signatures of biomass burning. This suggests a large-scale disturbance that spread across continents. Another dataset revealed unusual biological die-offs. Animal populations in Anatolia, the Black Sea Basin, and parts of the Levant declined sharply within the same window. Large game animals like aurochs and gazelles show sudden population drops in archaeological layers dated to 9,69,000 BCE. In some cases, entire animal communities disappeared from the record for centuries. Archaeologists have also noted that early hunter-gatherer groups in these regions vanished without clear signs of conflict or disease. They left tools, hearths, and shelters behind as if they walked away suddenly. Nothing explains what forced them to move or disappear. The team then turned to ancient myths. A large-scale cultural comparison system searched for overlapping descriptions in stories from early groups. Myths from the Near East, North Africa, the Caucasus, and the Eurasian steppe describe sudden catastrophic events during this era. They mention a sky serpent, a stone that screamed, and an age that ended overnight. Scholars once assumed these were metaphors. The timeline showed that these stories emerged at nearly the same moment Gobeclete was buried. What stunned the team even more was how closely these mythic images matched the carvings at the site. Very interesting about this site is that there's no mythological creatures. There's no hybrids. Every single one is an animal that actually exists. Gobeclete's pillars repeatedly show dangerous animals such as snakes, scorpions, vultures, and predatory mammals. These images appear too often and in too many consistent locations to be random decoration. When the mythic descriptions were compared to the carvings, the overlap was undeniable. Cultures separated by thousands of miles were describing the same fear at the same time. The final simulation examined patterns that normally lead to collapse. It combined climate data, geological shifts, population decline, and cultural disappearance. The model revealed that all these factors peaked within roughly 12 months of the burial of Gobeclete. This meant the builders were reacting to something that happened suddenly, globally, and with enough force to erase communities across continents. The team watched as the model projected the next cycle of these conditions. The timeline approached the present day. The simulation suggested that the same pattern of magnetic instability, atmospheric change, and global stress was rising again. This section doesn't have any reference,